This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland front of the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The Cleveland Cavaliers were unable to capitalize on their success in Game 3, suffering a blowout loss to the Indiana Pacers. Joining me today is my co-host that also just can't seem to get right during this playoff journey, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how are you feeling, buddy?
Not good. Voice is in rough shape. It turns out when your son coughs into your mouth for a straight week, chances of you getting sick are pretty good.
That sounds about right. I really wanted to blame you for getting me sick, but ultimately I wasn't. I didn't get sick from you because I got COVID for the first time, two weeks ago or a week ago, whenever that was, and you didn't have it. So I couldn't blame you. That was a little disappointing. Speaking of disappointing, I would say that Game 4 for the Cleveland Cavaliers is probably the most disappointing result that we've had from this group when it comes to playoff performances. We heard a lot after their Game 3 win about how they had to treat every single game like a Game 7, that there was going to be an appropriate amount of intensity. And I don't think, listening to Kenny Atkinson, listening to the players post game, I don't think anybody was happy with their effort. I think when you have a game that goes that poorly, it's a failure top to bottom, right? From the first man to the 15th man to the coaching staff, they did not come out with the necessary intensity and have now put themselves in a serious hole when it comes to this series.
Yeah, it's it's just a litany of problems. I'm not ready to say most disappointing game of the era actually. I was so mad Game 5 against the Knicks when it just came out. It was just the same game again.
Yeah. I think what we're going to see is, does history repeat themselves, right?
Yeah.
Are they able to come out in Game 5, regardless of who's available, and put forward a better effort? Because to me, the result wasn't, the disappointing thing. I know when we were talking before the game, I didn't have a great feeling about Game 4. I just kind of had a feeling that Indiana was going to come out with some counter punches. I was worried about, how guys were going to respond physically to attempting to play through Game 3. But what we got in Game 4, I don't think has anything to do with injuries. Like, you might say cumulatively they were a little more tired because of the energy they've had to expend themselves. But we have seen better effort from this team in every game this series. All three games, the first three games of the series, the Cavs won the battle on the boards. They won the points in the paint, second chance opportunities. There was physicality. I think Indy had the physicality advantage on the perimeter so far in this series, but the Cavs were really killing them on the inside. And that flipped in Game 4. I thought, defensive intensity dropped off to where we saw basically in that first half of Game 1, where the Cavs just didn't look ready for the series. I thought the rotations defensively were poor. There really wasn't a whole lot that you could hang your hat on in this game. And, it's one of those spots where, as I said, it's a failure from the top down. And, because of the situation that they've put themselves in, losing those first two games at home, all of a sudden what typically in a playoff series would be a successful weekend where you go and you get one of those road games as the team with home court advantage, typically that is a successful 3-4 kind of swing through a playoff series. But because of the hole that they put themselves in to start this series, you did not have the margin for error. You did not have the room to have a result like this on the scorecard.
Yeah, that's why you don't lose games 1 and 2 at home in a series. Yep. I mean, they have the rare advantage of, potentially being able to play 2 of the last 3 at home. Normally when you're down 3-1, it's, it's like 2016 where you had to, win Game 7 on the road. But honestly, bro, I'm not even thinking about Game 6s or Game 7s right now.
It's all about 5.
I just want to see them show up with some pride, some attention to detail. And like I've been thinking a lot about this series, and like, well, obviously, if it goes the way it's trending, we'll do a more proper eulogy. But I am disappointed right now about how this team's lack of, I guess, readiness for the things that are getting thrown at them. I don't feel like they've been a terribly, mentally resilient team in this series, which I think I'm pretty disappointed by, just because I thought that was what I was so impressed with all year. They didn't seem ready for that Pacers offense to start, and weren't able to really ever get their feet under them in game one. In this game, it's like, it almost looked like the players were like, wait, they're going to adjust to our zone?
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like they haven't been sharp, and all the while they've probably, on balance, outplayed Indy over the course of the series, minute by minute. But it just is kind of immaterial when you get to the results, and I think a lot of it comes to lack of attention to detail and lack of focus. And lack of sharpness. I was so impressed in game 3 with how they were flashing to beat the press, with how they were, when they got across half court, they were pushing and turning the corner and getting runs to get to the rim. They just had none of that in this game. I mean, they would get across, they'd spend 7.99999 seconds to get across half court, and then they'd stop and survey. And it's like, well, that's exactly what the press wants you to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I was really disappointed by that game, was the degree to which the Cavs ceded every part of the game to what Indy wanted to do and what Indy wanted to happen.
Yeah, I feel like they haven't stuck with their identity so far in this series. And, obviously when you have turmoil in terms of who's available and to what degree that they are available, they're in the lineup, but they're not there physically, that's going to have an impact. But I don't think it justifies what we saw in game 4, because we saw them with the guys that were available for game 4 come out with a much better effort, right? Like you said, the aggressiveness in beating that press, how they would come to the ball, how they would fight through it and make sure that they were maintaining tempo, not allowing Indy to dictate the terms of engagement with their perimeter pressure. We saw that in game 3. Just like in game 1, I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit. I thought they did find their footing in game 1. They ultimately took the lead. They just weren't able to kind of hang on to that. And obviously, Mobley and Hunter getting hurt in the fourth had something to do with that. But I think what we saw in game 1 was more understandable, right? You're coming off a laugher of a series where you didn't have to play with intensity, and you get punched in the mouth by a team that did play, in some tough games in the first round. That disappointing, but it's understandable. What we saw in game 4 is almost reverting back to where they were to start the series. And when you have the experience, when you've had the reps of playing against this team, what their strengths and weaknesses are at that point. That's what made it so disappointing to me. And, I don't like the fact that, we're in a situation where what they needed to do are things that we've seen. It just seemed like it got lost in the shuffle and forgotten. And just like game 1 was understandable, frustrating, but understandable. This type of result happens in playoff series. You had, game 6 of the first round in 2018 with LeBron, you lost by 35 to Indiana. Game 2 of the 2016 finals in Golden State, you lost by 33. Every time one of these, 30 to 40 point losses, even though, garbage time got it down to 20, anytime you have one of these games, it always feels like, oh, we don't belong in the series. It always feels bad. But again, if you win game 2, it feels like this is a successful weekend. That's, we can sit here and we say, flush that down. We break down the game the same way we're doing now, saying, what happened? Why did they let go of the rope? Why was there not the attention to detail and the focus? But because of the situation that they put themselves in, this stings so much more.
Yeah. And I do think there is something. I think part of the reason I was so apoplectic after game two, privately, I pulled it together for the pod, even though I was a sad boy. Um, I was so distraught because I know what a kitchen sink game looks like, and the Cavs had to play 2 in a row just to get the series to 1-2.
Yeah,
because they blew one of their kitchen sink games,
and I think that had some impact. For sure.
And I do think there's something to that where, everyone can say from a distance, and like, I don't know if this sounds excusey or not. People will, I'm sure, tell me, but we can say play with desperation. They said in the post game after game 3, we didn't do anything. We got to play with desperation. I do think the brain does let up a little bit. That's why no one's ever come back from 3-0, and 3-1 is so rare, because it's hard to play desperate night after night after night after night. Eventually your brain chemistry does want to revert to something calmer. It wants to find its, if desperation is one side of the mental spectrum, your brain wants equilibrium. It wants to chill, and you could tell that was what the Cavs were doing. They were, some of these pocket passes to Jared Allen where Nembhard is just able to dig down against the drop and blow up the pass. Like, that's just Donovan running a set like it's January,
Yep.
Not the level of force that you need them to play with. I'm not trying to go with Donovan. He's been amazing in the series. It's just a collective example of like what desperation play looks like and what it doesn't. And like, I've seen a lot of people griping about the physicality from Indy. I'm just not going to be one of them. There's stuff that annoys me. I'm glad Mathurin got tossed.
Yeah.
Halliburton flopping.
I enjoyed it in the game. Yeah. Which again was exactly what I said after game 3. If you're going to be the guy that does dirty plays, you can't also be the guy that flops.
But sorry. So like there's stuff I don't like about it, but like, I'm sorry guys, we won a championship pulling, grabbing, bumping, bruising people who preferred to play a finesse game and run around off pin downs and stuff. And like, you can't, Cavs got 20 first half free throw attempts. Yeah. The refs were calling stuff, and I don't think that is I think that's a thing you got to be able to overcome as an offense if you ever want to be worth anything in this league. And we have seen the Cavs continue to have that problem, when they're really, really focused, when they're really, really locked in, when they're really, really optimized, everyone's healthy, everyone's doing it good. We've seen them be able to beat up that kind of pressure, turn it against them. They did that to Miami in the first round. And, game of the year against OKC, they did that to OKC. But
they've done it at times in this series.
Yes. They Brandon in the chat was like, where's the 118 offensive rating I was promised? I was like, oh, it's like 117, or it was through 3 games,
Yeah.
But it's the consistency, it's the doing it under duress, it's doing it every play, and they just haven't been able to muster that kind of effort against that kind of pressure.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, people are going to overreact to some aspects of this game, right? Like I would say through 7 games of the playoffs, the Cavs largely own the interior. They've owned the glass. They own the points in the paint. Jared Allen has been fantastic. He was terrible in game 4. And in a lot of ways, I sometimes feel like Jared's the canary in the coal mine in terms of the Cavs' overall health, right? Like when game 4 against Miami, when Jared gets that steal and the breakaway to start the game, we say, okay, well, yeah, they're locked in. This is going to be a easy win for the Cavs. When he struggles like this, it's almost like he gets overwhelmed with the situation where there's so many breakdowns defensively and, just doesn't have the same impact. I'm not going to kill Jared for it because he has been exactly what we've needed throughout the playoffs prior to this game. I'm not going to kill Donovan for having a bad first half because, as you said, it was consecutive kitchen sink games. I was thrilled with their effort in game 2 and how hard they played shorthanded. I was thrilled with what they did in game 3. I'm not going to forget that because game 4 was so frustrating. Yeah. But, they weren't able to sustain. And I think there's something to what you're saying about, trying to maintain that desperation in all of these matchups. But I do want to get your thoughts on the pressure on the perimeter, because we've seen them beat it at times in this series. We've seen them struggle with it at times in the regular season. We've seen them excel against it at times in the regular season. What do you think it is that makes it so difficult for them to sustain? Is it that they have to play with such an elevated level of focus and effort and, just to make up for the fact that they do have a smaller backcourt? What do you think it is that makes it so that something that we know that they're capable of doing versus these teams, they aren't able to reliably do it at the level we want to see?
Well, I guess you just got to look to, what the difference was when they have done it. Typically, it's involved a Darius Garland who can move.
Yeah.
He's just falling over running right now. His feet they cannot.
And Donovan's playing through a calf issue.
Hunter can't grip the ball with his right hand. He's shot putting his jumpers right now. And then Ty, who was kind of your change of pace, like he was kind of your I'll hit you back option.
Yeah.
If you're gonna ride me, you're at least gonna get an elbow to your gut on the way as I turn the corner. Like Ty can't play right now.
No. Yeah.
So you have all these different, all the usual suspects you'd look to for press breaking aren't there right now, or in pressure breaking. And then also, frankly, I got to go at the team a little bit. So those are my nice excuses.
Yeah.
Evan Mobley's usage rate has dropped 5% in the postseason. This was your shtick the entire offseason, which is if you're going to have a small backcourt, you need to have front court initiation to be a release valve. Yeah. They're not doing it. I'm sorry. You can be as nice, like Nembhard and Nesmith can be as good as they want on defense. They're getting away with Thomas Bryant minutes comfortably.
Really glad. Yeah,
where's the team that bullied Khalil Ware off the floor?
Here's the thing. I'm really glad you brought this up because it's exactly what I have in mind, right? Like, I think on the one hand of the coin, that is something that they need to focus on, right? Like, I think from an off-season preparation standpoint, Donovan, I'm going to cut some slack because, he's been playing through the ankle. He's been playing through the calf, basically.
And he's been a killer. He's the only one who's turning the corner right now.
Right. I'm going to cut him some slack there. I understand what's going on with Darius. I actually think he's done a pretty decent job of turning the corner considering he's playing with one tire. But at the same time, like, I think that there is some physical maturity that he needs to continue to do. I think the same thing goes for Evan Mobley. I think this team needs to get a little more physical on the perimeter. But what I will say is you understand that you have to maintain a level of focus and aggressiveness on the perimeter to counteract what teams are able to do from a length standpoint. One of the ways you can do that is involving your bigs. And I know we've disagreed at times in the past when it comes to Jarrett being like, oh, he's kind of a function of the overall offense. You're not really running plays for him. You can run plays for Jarrett. He is, someone that's going to make smart decisions in the short roll. I think we saw in the Miami series, as you said, when we were attacking Khalil Ware, that is something that you can go to. And I think that has to be on both the guards and the coaching staff of making sure Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen are being used, that they are being counted on at times to break the pressure. Even when you're talking about the full court press, what is the intention of having Evan Mobley bring the ball up so many times throughout the regular season if that isn't a wrinkle that you're throwing to break the press? Yeah, Nesmith and Nembhard are going to be pressuring the guards as they're bringing it up and trying to make you use as much of the shot clock as possible. Are they going to do the same thing if it's Evan Mobley available as an outlet? Is Pascal Siakam going to start covering him, 94 feet? I don't believe so.
Be my guest if he wants to try.
Yeah, at the very least, I would like to find out, right? Like, I think that is something that you can go to in these spots. And as much as I think the overall situation we're in this series has to do with the injuries, right? Like, I don't think you lose those games at home if you're fully healthy, right? I think even if DeAndre Hunter and Evan Mobley don't get hurt in the fourth quarter of game one, I think you win that game. If lane violations get called properly, you win game two. That's all very frustrating, but the margins shouldn't have been that thin. And I think, as much as the overall situation, I believe has a lot to do with the injuries, what happened in game four didn't. And because it was things that it had looked like they had solved already in this series, that they kind of backtracked and backslid in, like that to me is what makes it very frustrating. And I think that's the type of stuff that's going to lead to some macro takeaways and reflection when you look back at whenever this playoff run ends.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, they're just not playing well enough to make me feel like you can just point to the injuries. And like,
agreed.
I think the injuries trim their margin for error for sure. But like, this is a team at the beginning of this series. We kind of said to each other, I don't know if we said on the pod, but we're like, if Darius doesn't play, it's going to be hard, but we can still win this series. We should, maybe, I don't know if we said should, but I think we both kind of felt like they had a really good shot to. But like not playing like this, not playing
Games
this.
1 and 2 showed how much of a margin for error there was. Like Indy's a very, very good team. The Cavs didn't shoot 30% in any of the first 3 games of the series, and they had chances to win every single one of these games, even without Evan Mobley, missing 2 of your top 3 players, missing DeAndre Hunter, who's been essential, but Donovan Mitchell playing through all the lower body ailments he has. It has shown their margin for error. Like they should be a team that can survive some postseason injuries and be able to be conservative with the management, which I think we were hoping that they were being conservative when it came to Darius, but I think it's very clear that
it's just one of those things that didn't get better.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it took a lot to get it to the point where he could even tough through it. And I'm not going to question his toughness. That it's a guy that played 22 minutes in the second half of a game with a broken jaw and a mouthful of blood. He was playing down the stretch of the season through this toe ailment. Like I'm not going to be questioning that, but I do think even limited, right? Like I think one of the things that we've loved about Darius is getting Evan Mobley involved. And we want to see, if you're playing through injuries and you're not at 100%, can you find the counters? Can you do what Donovan's done, which is, hey, I'm unfortunately every time that we've been in the playoffs with Donovan, pretty much he's dealing with some sort of lower body ailment, and the 3-pointer hasn't really been there, but he's found ways to be so effective. He's managed to get that rim pressure, and I think that's part of the growth and maturity process. But from a Darius standpoint, the 2-man game with him and Evan Mobley, like that got them to a 48 win pace before Donovan even got here, when the 2 of them were playing, right? Like that is something that you can rely on. That is one of the most effective 2-man combinations of the last few years. Not utilizing Evan Mobley enough is really disappointing, because at the very least I'd like to go down with the ship trying that, right? Like we understand how important that is for the future of this team and the future of this group. At least get those reps in, right? Like let's try to salvage this situation by doing that.
Well, and there's just like a little bit of like, and I think one of the most disappointing things about the last game was like they completely just stopped trying to run anything for anybody.
Right.
I mean, it was just like barely get the ball over half court, run a half-ass pick and roll, and try a midi. And it's like, like, hell, I don't care. Try a couple Evan post-ups. He's gotten way better on the post. See if you can get a switch and try to mash that. Get 2 on the ball. Like a lot is correctly noted about this team's 3-point shooting falling off a cliff in this series. But I'm not going to play the variance game here. Because not only, I mean, I haven't checked the wide open numbers for these.
I can look that up. Go
ahead. Since game 1. But I would argue that even their wide open ones aren't easy right now, because they're taking so much effort to get to them. Donovan missed one where he had to do like a very violent step back in game 4. And it's like, none of these threes are in balance and rhythm. No one gets catch and shoot threes except Max.
Yeah.
And it's just like your process is just not leading to a shot diet that's worth putting your name on.
Yeah. They're down to 15 wide open threes per game. They're shooting 27% on those. But again, like that is such a far drop off from what we saw in the regular season when it came to this team, right? Like they were a team that was in the regular season. They got 25 wide open threes per game when they would play Indiana. For the season, they got over 20, right? And sure that 27% is going to be
what did Milwaukee
get
there against them? That's what I want to know, because I felt like they were getting an open three whenever they wanted. And I know Giannis is great, and we don't have a Giannis, but we have ways to make defenses break. And that's like, again, turn the freaking corner, man. Like, you gotta.
Milwaukee got 17.
Like, that Milwaukee team should not be generating more open threes than us.
Agreed.
And I'll bet they hit more of them too, because they were open in rhythm, comfort types of shots, and that's
they shot over 40%.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I guess some of this maybe I am playing the result a little, and maybe they still
it's
should
hard not to, right? Like
maybe they should be shooting better. But I'm also watching the game, and I'm watching Donovan, empty. Like if you have like a big stamina meter for the game that reflects how tired you are, but you have like a possession by possession exertion meter. I feel like every Cavs three, they've expended their per play exertion.
Yeah.
So even if they get open, they're freaking having to, get set up, really, really think about getting a clean shot off. It's just not easy. And then you watch Indy, and it's just a parade of mostly rhythm threes. So I don't know what side I'm more disappointed in, the defensive side or the offensive side right now. I lean offense because I've always felt that's the problem, and I think it is fueling Indiana's perimeter game and transition game. How many Miles Turner trailer threes has he gotten in this series? Just because Indy's just constantly in motion. But then it just goes back to the detail thing. Sorry, I'm just getting a little ranty, but like the floor balance isn't even good. Like I'm not seeing them do enough right for a team that I thought was ready to go compete for a championship. And like, it's not over. They can absolutely clean this stuff up. They might not win the series even if they clean it up, by the way, because the margins are so thin now. But like, that's what I want to see. I felt like I really watched them give a God's honest effort in Boston, completely outgunned by the end. I want to see the same thing.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's clear that they're not putting themselves in their position to do the best work, which is something that Zoom AI Companion would never allow to happen for us. Because only you can do your best work, Carter. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion. I think, the effort and focus is the biggest thing for me, because this loss stings a little bit less just because I can see the situation that we're in physically, right? Like, even if they came back to win the series, we talked about this on the last podcast. Like, I think the ceiling for what this playoff run can be is capped by the health situation that we're in. And now we can add Donovan Mitchell to that list. He is listed as questionable for the next game, for game 5. Will likely be a game time decision. Look like a re-aggravation of the ankle seems to be the reporting. I did see Brian Windhorst was mentioning, hey, he has been playing through a calf. All of that's connected. As someone that is currently going through a setback when it comes to my rehab, and it just leads to me being incredibly, paranoid when it comes to anything calf related. But I definitely trust the Cavs trainers and medical staff when it comes to that. But we'll see what his availability is. But I would say, even if Donovan isn't able to play, I think this team is able to put up a good enough effort to win game 5. I think
they're at home, man. The series. They won 64 games.
And, I think, once again, the effort and how it occurs is the biggest thing. I could have been okay with a game 4 loss I could have been okay with that exact type of scenario if the rest of the series had felt differently, right? Like we understand that there's going to be blowout losses in either direction in the playoffs, and sometimes you lose the battle and you come back to win the war. Both of those instances that I mentioned before, where with LeBron-led teams, the Cavs lost by 30 to 40 points in the playoffs. They came back and they won the series, whether it was the 2016 finals or Game 7 against Indiana in the first round. So it doesn't have to be a death sentence. But for me, what I really want to see is the Cavs to feel like the Cavs. And if they go down in Game 5, 6, 7, whatever the case may be, with an honest effort where it feels like the Cavs, I'm going to feel better about that.
Yeah,
And
there's no shame in losing to an indie team that after like a 10-16 start went bananas the rest of the way. That is, that I was, had appropriate fear of. There's no shame in losing to them when, with the injury context you have around them. I think that you just cross that threshold when you're not playing your style of basketball, when you're, even like stuff like Ty Jerome just having a nightmare series, like that sucks, right? Like I'm not sitting here mad at Ty Jerome. I'm bummed. I'm sure Ty is bummed that he's having the series he's having, especially after the first round he had against Miami, where you think, okay, everything we thought about this guy.
Riser. Here we go.
Yep. And, so I'm sure he's bummed, but there's a reason we're not on here decrying that Ty Jerome is letting the team down, because, like, one, that's not interesting analysis, and only serves to make yourself feel good holding someone accountable or whatever, and I hate that. But like,
which we're going to get a lot of that this offseason, I'm sure.
Yeah, but like the reason we're not doing it is because like that's just like a guy having a bad performance, and that is understandable. It's not personally acceptable, I'm sure, to him, but like it's not indicative of a team losing who they are, and like so much of what's gone on in the series in these pockets of pain, Game 4 notwithstanding, which was just the whole factory of pain. But like these pockets of pain where they're losing these games, it's them losing themselves, not playing the way that we know they're capable of playing. And it's like, well, guys, like, I guess there's a bit of reaping sowing going on. You don't play your style against a good team who never ever doesn't play their style. Like I do think if they lose this series, there should be some soul searching, not just about what this roster is capable of, but like they should look across the aisle and be like, why do they never lose who they are? Even that Game 3 where the Cavs had a great game plan, controlled the game the whole way through. In the fourth quarter, there were the Pacers doing their thing.
You felt several pushes from them, right?
Yeah.
Like the Cavs were able to answer back, but even though they had those stretches, they did get back to who they are and what their style of play is. I think you're right. I think that's going to be one of the macro takeaways, because even though you can ascribe a lot of what's happened to the injuries, that losing your identity and your style of play is something that, honestly, if the Cavs were fully healthy, it probably could overcome in this individual series. They probably would overcome in this individual series, but it would show up later in the playoffs. It's going to show up, against a Boston or against an OKC. And if we want to hold ourselves to that championship standard, and if that's what this team is going to continue to build towards, that is usable data. That is a macro takeaway that you can take from this series. And the people that doubted the Cavs coming into this, I don't expect them. Like, it would be absolute lunacy for me to expect them to look at this result and say, okay, well, I'm going to approach this with nuance. No, they're going to go to their priors, right? Like, when you have played as well as the Cavs have played this season and you earn those expectations for yourself, people are going to have opinions. If you come up short of expectations, you are going to receive backlash. I think that this team is more than capable of handling that. But I do think, you have to find those nuggets of truth, or as you like to say, what lessons do you want to learn from this situation? And I think that type of identity aspect of this is something that requires analysis. It requires them to reflect upon it, and applied properly can be something that ends up being a difference maker when you talk about this team's evolution to try to become a championship team.
And most importantly, has nothing to do with injuries, because injuries are always going to muddy your analysis. They're complicated. We get yelled at a lot. We're getting yelled at in the YouTube chat right this very second for talking too much about injuries, which I think is funny because I think we're barely talking about them.
I think we're talking about why they don't matter.
Yeah. If anything, yeah. But like at the end of the day, see, when things do get muddy in any scientific experiment, which every basketball season for your team is an experiment, you look at the controls, you look at the things that aren't going to be variable. And, there's a reason, even without Halliburton in the conference finals last year, that Indy was making Boston sweat.
Yep.
And I just think they need to, whatever road it is, they have to find it, whether it's going to be this series, whether it's the off season, whether it's in a different era of the team. Like, that
should be your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal should be an identity and a style of play
that you can impose, and that you can impose. I've one of my favorite models for team building that I've brought up a lot is the grit and grind Grizzlies, who never won a title, who had plenty of series. They lost, every year. They always lost someone or to someone, but you knew that going into this series, and you can even look at the Magic right now in that way. Like the Magic got,
what the Magic series
they got comfortably dispatched in 5 games, and Boston hated every second of it. Like that's what I want. That's what I want my team to be. That's what I want my team to do. And I'm not saying go be the Orlando Magic, be the Cavs, but like you got to be the Cavs all the time.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, goes back to what we were saying before about involving the bigs, and particularly involving Evan Mobley. We know how important he has to be to the Cavs' success. And I feel like when we've been in some of these games where, they've kind of lost the sense of who they are, it's not because Mobley's out there struggling. And I think there were times in game 4 where it seemed like, okay, they know what he's trying to do, and they were taking away some of his counters. They did a good job of him individually, but never really feels like, you don't get the 5 of 20 Evan Mobley game, right? Where it's all right, we're trying to go down with the ship and he's just not able to deliver.
What's the most field goal attempts Evan's taken in the playoffs so far?
14?
13.
Oh, wow. I'm good at guessing. Getting back to, your grit and grind example, I think an even more relatable example for Cavs fans, the 2016 Cleveland Cavaliers. You looked at that 2015 finals and people said, look how they were able to muddy things up against the Warriors. They need to play, you would need to bench Kyrie. You need to bench Kevin Love. You need to muddy up the series. You got to slow things down. You got to make the Warriors uncomfortable. You got to beat them up. And the Cavs said, that's not our identity. Yes, that worked in 2015 out of desperation. That was how we were able to make a series of it. But that's not how we play. And the top 4 highest paced games of the 2016 finals were all Cavs wins, because they played their style. They weren't afraid that their style played into what the Warriors typically like to do. They played to their identity. And I think finding that identity is one of the most important things for the Cavs. And, I think we've talked a lot about the players and where they came up short in this game. But I do think beyond them, understanding what needs to change for game 5, executing the way that we've seen in previous games this series, I do think some of this has to fall on the coaching staff as well. I thought Indiana came out, they had a plan of attack for the 3-2 zone, and the Cavs stayed in. They stayed in looks that made Indiana feel comfortable offensively far too frequently in this game. They were able to, get those deep corner shots and attack the zone from there. I think 3-2 zone and zone in general is something that you can throw at Indy. I think it has to be for a possession or two, right? Like, okay, we're playing man to man. Boom, for 1 or 2 possessions in a row, we're throwing zone. Then we're going back to man. We're going to soft switch here. We're going to fight through screens here. We're going to throw a variety of looks, which honestly we saw against, the Miami Heat and Tyler Hero. They were throwing a variety of defensive looks at him. They stayed in the same looks far too consistently. And I think that allowed Indy to just play their game, as you said, uninhibited.
Yeah. And it's not that, and just necessarily, I'm like, you're not allowed to play 3-2 zone anymore. Nate Duncan made some really good observations in the game on Twitter about how, Evan needs to just, when he gets screened at the top, he just needs to stick with the roller because that roll is just too unprotected, especially if Jarrett isn't out there. But when you do that, then you open up the pull-up game. Now you're just getting screened uninhibited because the help can't get up there in time. So it's like, it just felt like not only did they stick in the 3-2 zone, they stuck with the same 3-2 zone principles for too long. And it's like,
you're right.
They have a solve for the way you're guarding this. You have to tweak it or show something different every now and again, even within the 3-2.
Yep.
And they just kind of hung and said, well, let's see. I mean, Indy had so many wide open layups, duck-ins where a big rolls or cuts to the rim baseline and catches it with ridiculously deep position and gets the easiest and ones of their career. Like, I mean, there was just such a systematic opening, and then the execution was poor too, and like, you can maybe get away with one with the Cavs defensive talent. You can't get away with both.
Yeah.
Ugh,
no.
that sucked.
Yeah. And the thing is, right, like, Indy's going to make you uncomfortable. Indy doesn't have the level of defensive personnel that the Cavs have, right? Like, even if you look at playoff defensive rating, the Cavs do have a better defensive rating for the playoffs. But what Indy does is they rush your decision making. You have to be sharp at all times. And I think one of the things that the Cavs have had defensively, for the most part, the defense has held up. Regular season, playoffs, they've been a good defense. This is the first series where I feel like they've lost control defensively at times. But I think what we've seen from the Cavs is they do a good job contesting. The rim protection has always been fantastic. They're able to stay in their shell defense and, put forward a defense that's good enough to go out there and win, and often a top 5, top 10 defense. But they don't make teams uncomfortable often enough. They will stay kind of in those base looks, and they don't rush your decision making. They don't make things more difficult for you in those ways. They trust what they are able to do, right? Like Max Strus getting in the jersey of Tyrese Halliburton, fighting through screens. You love to see that. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, what they're able to do on the back line defensively, like, that is all really important stuff. But they aren't able to create havoc when it comes to their defense, unless it's, Evan Mobley grabbing a block out of the air and starting a fast break as a result of it.
Yeah, it's kind of the Isaac Okoro problem in whatever the opposite of miniature is.
100%. Sound positional defense that doesn't do enough to bother the shot before the shot. Right. Yep. And I think, that's another one of those things that I'm going to have, my eye on when it comes to the offseason, right? Because there's going to be limitations in terms of what this team can do as a second apron team. It's tinkering on the margins, but understanding that it's okay. How can we make enough of a change to our style of play without dramatic shakeups? Like how can we do things both internally and on the margins, from a roster construction standpoint, to modify our style of play so that we are able to be a little bit more bothersome? Because when you have that level of backline defense, in theory, you should be able to do a little bit more gambling. You should be able to blitz a little bit, blitz and recover, and make teams uncomfortable defensively. And that's one of those things that I'm going to have an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. Game 5, do you make any rotational changes?
I don't think you can. Like, you can say, all right, well, should Craig Porter Jr. play instead of Ty? No, there's been times where I'd like to see Craig. I liked the minutes that he had. I thought that was one of the issues with game 2 is I would have liked to have seen him get a second shift. I like his athleticism out there. You can say Javonte Green for energy and things like that, but I think you just kind of have to go with the guys that you have. Obviously, some of that is going to be dependent on the availability of Donovan Mitchell. If he's not able to play, you're inevitably going to have some changes to the rotation. If I was to suggest a wild card in that kind of instance where you have to have a major kind of, you have to replace a major contributor in Donovan Mitchell, I wouldn't hate throwing out Jalen Tyson just for a physicality, second chance opportunities, and because might have to be one of those guys that you rely on in the future to, change how you feel on the perimeter, just from a physicality standpoint.
I might be playing Jalen over Dean or Isaac and just give it a shot.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, you said if Donovan doesn't play, I'm saying maybe even if he does.
Okay, because at this point, Isaac's just not in the rotation.
That's kind of what I'm suggesting. Not a long shift. I'm talking 8-10 minutes total. But that is paired with, it's a two-parter because I think I'm playing Evan and Jarrett 40 minutes plus.
Yeah.
And saying, we're
going down with our best foot.
Yeah, I'm going down with two bigs. I'm going down playing guys who can, change the physicality game in our favor a little bit.
Yep.
Get us extra possessions in the form of rebounds. A little bit of extra shooting from the wing and Jalen, especially since I don't trust DeAndre to be able to shoot right now. But these are a little bit of, some of the playing a rookie who wasn't in your rotation all year in a deciding playoff game, is indicative of what the state of the back end of the Cavs rotation right now, where the real answer is Ty has to play well, Darius has to play well, Jarrett has to play well, Evan has to play well.
Yeah,
and if they don't, they're probably gonna
things easier for every other role guy.
Yeah. But if they can't, then I need someone who's gonna try stuff and maybe mess up. And I'll go with Jalen doing that.
I completely agree. I think the Jalen Tyson conversation is one that we're going to be having this offseason.
It will be. I don't even know if it's a conversation. I just think he needs to get there. They need him to get there.
No, but I mean, opening up that opportunity is going to take, some changes because they have so much depth, right? So I think that he is someone that brings some of that physicality, some of that edge on the perimeter. And I honestly, I love what Max has been for the Cavs. I think he, when you look back at that sign and trade, this is basically the best case scenario. I think he has gotten better as he's been a member of the Cavs. I think he has been probably our most consistent player in the playoffs. Now that Jarrett has had that kind of one dud game, I would have given Jarrett the nod prior to that, but I think Max is running with that crown right now. I like what DeAndre has given the Cavs. I'm cutting him a ton of slack.
I just don't think he can hold the ball.
He can't grip the ball right now. I'm going to cut him slack in that scenario, but I really like how he is fit with this team. It's about going beyond those six, right? And reflecting on, okay, well, things went wrong for Ty Jerome. What does that mean, right? Isaac Okoro, I think we're going to have some conversations about him. Dean Wade, we're not going to have some conversations about him. But when you have promising, young players like a Jalen Tyson and to some extent a Craig Porter Jr., it forces you to have these conversations from a team building standpoint. So we'll see what the availability is for Game 5. When it comes to Donovan Mitchell, as much as I want to go out and win this game and extend the series, you got to do what's best for the long-term health there. So we'll see what his availability is. I'm sure he will be fighting to give it a go. But I'm not disappointed with his effort at all in these playoffs. I think he has, laid it all on the line, and that's exactly what I hope from the overall team in Game 5.
Absolutely, man. Come on, let's extend this thing. I don't want to see these dudes go out at home.
No, totally agree. Let's defend home court and see, how much further we can extend it from there, one game at a time. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. Carter, thank you for struggling through that voice. I appreciate it. I can't believe this has happened again for you in the playoffs, but I love you, buddy. Love you, all our listeners as well. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of their review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Be sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.